Under Armour New Orleans, who stood out, who were the under-the-radar prospects, all of that and more on the Portal Podcast.
Locked On presents The Portal, the daily podcast covering college football recruiting and everything NIL, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back into the Portal Podcast, where you get your daily recruiting news and you get your NIL and transfer portal scoop as well. I am your host, Brian Smith, longtime college football recruiting analyst and writer. Thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. And our podcast is presented by FanDuel, where new customers can get $200 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. We're going to talk about the big guys, the receivers, the players that stood out that were expected to, as well as some under-the-radar prospects. And the first thing we're going to do here on the Portal Podcast is we're going to talk about the players that stood out amongst the big guys, the big players that really are making Louisiana famous for as long as I can possibly remember. This is a group that is very, very talented this year beyond even what I'm used to. Now, keep in mind, Louisiana's history for defensive linemen, especially the true interior guys, is probably about as good as it gets anywhere in the United States per capita. They produce a lot of players that go to the NFL. And I want to start off with Richard Anderson. For those of you on YouTube watching, he was number 95. I've got a video running. If you haven't had a chance, I've got a video that I just turned off the volume and I just let it ride right here for those watching. I put it up here. But Richard Anderson was 95. He's a dominant player. Dylan Berryman, number 94. He's 340 pounds. He was the smaller of the two. Richard Anderson was 356. Lamar Brown, the two-way player out of University Lab in Baton Rouge, who's a top 10 player nationally. He told me he wants to play D-line in college. He was number 91. All these guys, despite their size, had one key trait: physicality off the snap and a really good first step that would match it. So they're not just powerful or not just athletic. It's both. That's the one ingredient with all of them. Their ability to get off the snap. And there were 6-7 guys that were high-level defensive linemen. But those three in particular, just as pure interior guys, were impressive to me in terms of their ability to run over guys with a one-arm stab, make a quick move, go across their face, or to use something like a spin move. There was one play where Richard Anderson did a spin move and basically went unevaded in the A-gap. That is a 356-pound man doing that, by the way. But overall, I just thought that the D-line group was the best that I'd seen this year. And I've been to Under Armour Atlanta, Orlando, IMG, and Miami prior to going to New Orleans. So for one camp, this was the best group that I'd seen. J. Raylan McCoy, a kid that I know well out of Tupelo, Mississippi. He's a true power DN. He's about 245. He was really good again. He got MVP by the Under Armour group. He played in the game and he came back and competed. Lamar Brown didn't need to go to this camp to get invited. He came and competed. Same thing with Richard Anderson. He doesn't need to be there, and he came out and competed. Dylan Berryman's got Texas Tech and Texas A&M, all these schools coming after him, and he's got OVs. He came out and competed. So I loved the attitude amongst this, and it's why so many schools recruit Louisiana, and if you're not, at the very least, you're missing out on opportunity to get good defensive linemen. I'm just going to go through quote unquote, a handful of them that were good. And I'm not saying this is the full list because it is not. The list for the state just of Louisiana is good. And there were some really good Mississippi players there as well. And to that point, I already mentioned J. Raylan McCoy from Tupelo. Nolan Wilson is a power edge or weak side edge. I don't know where he's going to end up. He's at Picayune Memorial, one of the best programs down in the southwest part of the state. It's almost in Louisiana, actually. Nolan's a great kid. He's got a bunch of visits lined up, and from talking to him, he is wide open, like where he's going to end up. That is going to be a wild recruitment. He's a little overwhelmed, which is kind of cool in a way, the way he's talking about it. He's just trying to figure it out going on these trips. So good for him, but I really enjoy talking to him. I like him as an edge. Maybe he does grow into an inside guy at time, but after seeing players like Richard Anderson, they're so big already, Nolan weighs about 100 pounds less, give or take. That's just how crazy the amount of talent there is down in Louisiana and Mississippi. They got players 100-pound difference that are really, really good regardless. So anyway, moving on, a kid that I didn't know anything about. I don't want to say he was under the radar, but Darius McKinley. He played defensive end. He's out of Acadiana. It's in the central part of Louisiana. That is a really good player. He had one rep where he came off quick, just like I mentioned with Jay Raylan and with all the guys from earlier that just ran over people. Like Dylan Berryman ran over guys multiple times. It was just incredible. That's another guy that did. I didn't know anything about Darius McKinley. He had a one-arm stab where he literally drove the offensive tackle back about 4 yards and planted him on his butt right by the cone. And this was a 300-pound man he put on his butt with one arm. And he's not considered to be one of the 4 or 5 best defensive linemen at this camp. Again, his name is Darius McKinley. He's at Acadiana High School. He's class of 26 in Louisiana. And I'm like, okay, this just shows the depth that we have in the state of Louisiana. It's a really, really crazy amount of talent. But if I had to pick just one guy from this group long term for defensive line, I'm going to pick Richard Anderson because you can't teach his lateral ability at 356 pounds. He's as good an upside player at D-tackle as I've seen the last few years conservatively, maybe the last 5, because all the following traits are compiled into one thing. He knows who he is. He's a D-tackle. He doesn't mind that. He's still willing to work his craft. He has the ability to make guys look stupid if they get overly aggressive and try to jump set him. He will absolutely bury you with a one-arm stab, push you all the way back to the quarterback with traditional power move, and he does it with leverage. He's about 6'2". And finally, he's a guy that just loves to compete. I can't state that enough. If you're going to be going up against players that are SEC, et cetera, and Richard's committed to the LSU Tigers, Florida came in second for those that were curious, you must have a lot of really good football players ready to take on a bevy of moves and a guy that's just a mountain of a man. I think that Richard Anderson will be a top 5 pick in the NFL draft one day. Maybe the guy that kind of sets the trend whatever year he comes out in the draft. He'll be the first tackle taken if I had to guess. As for looking at it from a perspective of which guys are like coming up, there weren't a ton of players that I would just say this is an easy way to pick because the top end guys were so good that I really don't know if I can just pick one guy or 2 guys. It was just an elite group of offensive and defensive linemen. So I'll just talk about a couple O linemen here and kind of go about it that way. Any way to dismiss the fact, though, that D-line was the best group there. Let's be clear with that. All right. As far as the O-line goes, the guys that kind of stood out to me, Donnell Robinson, kid out of Holmes County Central. It's a program in Mississippi. It's always had players. He was recognized by Under Armour after the camp. I really liked him. Bryson Cooley, he was a kid that was really good. I didn't know much about him, but when he walked up, I'm like, holy cow, who's that guy? A few people started interviewing. I'm like, obviously, he's a good player. He's out of West Jones. He was pretty good in the one-on-ones. DeMar Dotson has a really good amount of power, and he anchors well. And then another kid, Leon Noel Jr. out of Edna Carr, which is ironic because that's the high school where Under Armour held the event in New Orleans, Louisiana. Those guys are just a handful. But going up against the T-line group they went up against, these are all like SEC kind of level players. It was still really hard. And pass rushing drills, O-line have a harder time because there's no pads on, and it's very difficult to see guys being able to block them when they can't really get their hands on something and just grab. Because, like, I know holding is technically illegal, but if this isn't a dry blocking deal, you got to either jump set the guy or be really, really good with your ability to set, whether it's going to be deep or you're going to jump out hard left, whatever it is, especially with some of these speed rushers, it's pretty rough. Moving on to the receivers and the defensive backs here in just a second, but just recognize again, any school out there not recruiting Louisiana for O-line, D-line, there's something wrong. Same thing with Mississippi. There's a reason that Under Armour went back to New Orleans and started adding that in. It's just an elite group. When we come back, we're going to talk about the receivers, the DBs, got a running back to discuss, and some under-the-radar guys, too. That is next here on the Portal Podcast. Get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trade. Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400 plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need, delivered fast, coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for that edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage, and now it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code SH5 for 5% off your order. That's supplyhouse.com. This show is also brought to you by our friends over at WayFair. When your home needs that reflect in style, and with WayFair, it's easier to make it happen than whenever, your home should reflect that style. And with WayFair, it's easier than ever to make that happen. Whether you're looking for a simple refresh or tackling a big home project, WayFair has everything you need in one place. Wayfair's huge selection makes it easy to find the perfect place, no matter your space or budget. From cozy furniture to stylish decor and easy kitchen essentials, outdoor must-haves, Wayfair has it all. Finding the perfect place is not an easy thing to do, but for me, I ordered a desk for a computer and I put it together. It was delivered right to my door for just over $130, delivery included. So head over to wayfair.com and find something that's just for you and your style today. That's wayfair.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. Not to be outdone, wide receiver and DB group, they were elite. And to that point, one of the things that I always like to do is watch a little bit of the running backs as the O-line, D-line drills are finishing up with the one-on-ones. So mixing them together, they're really all like receivers and DBs. I know the linebackers get a tough deal out of this. I try not to really grade linebackers in camps because if you're not tackling, to me, that's not linebacker play. So I kind of leave that out. But the one running back I want to mention, and I don't know if anybody's going to disagree with this based on his offer list, for one thing, but if you talk about DeKalb High School in Mississippi, Damarius Yates is one of the players that has kind of stood out for a while. I heard about him last year as Mario Nash Jr. told me, hey, this is the next guy up at my high school. Mario signed with Florida State. Well, Damarius went out and played like a receiver as a running back. And again, one-on-ones at these camps, linebackers are put on skates a lot, but this was ridiculous. There were plays where he beat guys 5-6 yards almost immediately with a hard step, with a combination move, and with just sheer change of direction. It's almost like you were writing with a pencil on a piece of paper how hard he could cut. Damarius Yates is a future NFL player. He's out of DeKalb, Mississippi, and he has tremendous hands. Flat out, he has the ability to play receiver at the next level, even though DeKalb County uses him as a running back, and I guess he will play that at the college level, but I don't see how he is not a slot receiver, at least in part. Dominant player. He would have been, if he'd have played for the Pirate at Mississippi State, holy moly, they'd have found every way in the world to get him the ball, and he would have been prepared to go on and be an NFL player. He could have been the leading receiver in the NFL at the running back position. Really unique football player. I enjoy watching him play. Alabama, Ole Miss, Florida State, several schools are in on him. As for the receivers, 2 or 3 guys, not surprisingly, showed out that we expected. Jamari Mack out of Destrehan High School, one of the most prominent programs in Dixie, just outside of New Orleans. He was expected to be good, but he was phenomenal. He finds a way to beat guys with stop and go at the line of scrimmage, change of direction, head shakes. He just gets guys off on skates and off kilter almost instantly. I don't know if that's an instinct thing with him, with how to do it or when or both. But Jabari Mack wins most of his battles within the first 2 to 3 steps. Like, he could stack a guy as quick as any receiver I've seen in the 2026 class. For a guy as yoked as he is, like, he's built like a running back. He's put in the time in the weight room. He is put together. Not many guys are like that. They're usually the 5'9", 165 guy. He's got to be around 200 pounds. And he is just put together. Looks like a boxer or a wrestler. He's that kind of physically strong athlete. And he's playing outside. So receivers that wanted to come up and jam him, even if they got a hand on him, he was able to thwart them more often than not. I got one of his touchdowns as he ran right by me in the corner. He made it look easy. And he was as dominant as it's going to get. I don't know where he's going to go. Most people assume LSU, and maybe it will be. Destrehan certainly sent several players to Tiger Stadium. But my goodness, that kid's stock went way up in my book. I really liked him a lot. Xavier McDonald, Morton, Mississippi, that's as an elite. And outside, just go get it, make crazy catch guys you're going to find. 6'3", 160 pounds. And shout out to him. He's a tremendous kid. I'd never interviewed him before. Really nice guy. LSU's probably the team to beat there, too. He grew up an LSU fan. He told me that's the one school he knew that he would, no matter what, take his visit to. Ole Miss, Florida State, and a whole bunch of other schools are still coming after him. It doesn't matter, though, right now. He's just trying to get everything formulated. I think the visits will play out, and here's the key. From what I am told, he's a young man that wants to go somewhere and play right away. Where that is will dictate where he ends up more than anything else, at least from what I'm told. But again, he's a great kid, too, and, he wasn't all that concerned about the visits and all that talking to him. He was just more happy with his performance and competing. And good for him, because he'd already played in the Under Armour game like a few of these other guys, like Jay Rayland, etc. Didn't care. He wanted to go out there and compete. I don't get enough guys like Xavier McDonald. Too many kids get their stars, like he's a high 4-star, and then, I'm good. I don't need to compete in anything. That guy usually doesn't maximize his talent and make it to this thing they call the National Football League. Xavier McDonald still has upside because he's got to add some weight. He's pretty thin, but you're not going to outwork him. And his length, speed, and burst, he's a really good receiver. I could see him playing in the National Football League one day. Moving on to the receiver position, Braylon Callis is a kid that's really good. I like him a lot. Could be a slot, really athletic kid. I like a lot of guys actually at the receiver position, but trying to narrow it down to like 3 to 5 is so ridiculously hard. I know that everybody has their own favorites and whatnot, but a kid that I'll use this as an example, a player I didn't know near as much about, I'll just get into it now. For under the radar kids, Greg Wilfred out of Edna Carr, there's that school again, from New Orleans. He makes really good catches. Saw him start to stand out during the drills, a couple of the catches that weren't exactly thrown where they were supposed to. He was really good, and he was that way as he got into the one-on-ones as well. Continuing on, just kind of looking at the group overall, let's just go ahead and go into this group now. For the under the radar, there were a couple others, but maybe the one that surprised me the most receiver-wise was Jalen Ash. He's at Archbishop Rummel. They had posted on the UC report for Under Armour that this kid had competed at the Saturday camp to get invited into the main camp on Sunday. And they showed a couple of videos. I'm like, man, he looks really good. And Archbishop Rummel, long-standing program in New Orleans. Not really shocked, but he made some catches, including one where he got hit right in the face. I'm taking a photo. He got smacked right in the face. Guy lands on him. He still catches the football, rolling to the ground like competitor. And he has the speed and length you're looking for. He is built to win the deep ball. He is a thoroughbred. I can't name which guy I'd want to pick to use the best comparison, but think of any guy that's 6'2", 180 pounds in college football that's just a deep threat. That's what he is, but he also has the ability to break off a route and catch you kind of looking back, getting ready to turn your hips, and then he'll run a comeback or he'll run a dig, and you're in trouble. Because once he catches the ball, he can really run too. I expect him to kind of step onto the scene. Moving on to the defensive back position. This is a young guy that kind of moved into the forefront a little bit faster than most guys. Coach Cox, who coaches the DBs and does a lot of the training there with Under Armour and gets all the guys warmed up, he told me he was going to put him with the best players in the DB group. And I said, well, what's the deal? And he goes, he's only a freshman right now. He's going to be a sophomore next year. I'm like, have you ever done that before? And he said, no. Now, this is a kid that's at John Curtis. Keelan's at John Curtis, and he's put together. He's going to be a nickel or a safety long-term. He knows his craft. He's way ahead on his ability to catch the football when it's misthrown or he breaks on it. So he capitalizes. But more than anything else, he stays on the line he's supposed to. He takes coaching if he does something wrong. And he's just ahead on, like, again, his technique. When I looked at him, I said, he looks like a junior in high school. Same thing Cox said. So that's a kid that I think can really, really start to make a move forward. The last kid here I want to talk about amongst some of the players that kind of stood out early. And we kind of expected it because he did well at another camp earlier last year, or excuse me, not just a camp last year, but he did well also at Battle Miami this year, is Bricks Cherry, the quarterback from Baylor School. He came down from Chattanooga. It's a long way from Tennessee. He's committed to Louisville. He really broke out at Battle Miami. He was really, really good at that tournament consistently. Committed to Louisville not far from that time, but he still doesn't get a lot of attention. And I just want to bring it to him. He got MVP and he earned it. There were a lot of good players there, but the quarterback position, Briggs was really good. So hats off to him. A kid that I forgot to mention, standout, the MVP. I knew something about him, and I was told that he was good. Hayward Howard Jr. out of Edna Carr again. He was DB MVP. He's kind of a thin kid, long. Florida, Miami, Florida State, Texas. Those are some of the visits. Auburn. He's got a lot of schools coming after him. That kid's going to be elite player based on how physical he is, how much he likes to challenge people at the line of scrimmage. And quite frankly, he's a kid that with his frame, he could be 200 pounds in a couple of years. He's probably not much over 170 right now, but I see why teams wanted him. He was one of the front group with Cox, with the DBs, and there aren't many corners at that length that can turn and run and then just change directions the way Hayward could. But if he made a mistake and Cox got on him, he would go correct it. We moved to the one-on-one drills. And again, this was a really good group of receivers. I need to continue to dive into it. I thought Mack and McDonald were the best, but that's not shocking. If you look at the group, everybody could run. This is New Orleans. Like, think about how many guys just LSU's gotten out of the state of Louisiana in the last 15 years that went on the NFL. You have to be on guard to get bombed at any point. He took one kid to the ground, like just beat him up so bad at the line of scrimmage, he didn't get past the line more than about a yard. And when he had to play trail technique, he used his length. He wasn't as grabby as some other guys. In these one-on-ones, most DBs are just grabbing like crazy. He's not as bad about it as most. And I really think that Hayward Howard could end up being a top 100 recruit. And a couple of services don't even have him ranked right now. So good for him. When we come back, I'm going to talk a little bit about how this is such an important culmination of all the things that we have going on in the recruiting industry, why Under Armour, among other camps, I mean, it's the premier one, really helps us understand who the best players are and who wants competition. That is next here on the Portal Podcast. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's $200 to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. Here's an example. I like the Cinderella stories in March Madness. Always have since I was a kid watching the tournament all the way back to the 1980s. To me, that's the most fun if you're going to look at putting a wager down on a game. You can pick about anything. You can pick final score, you can pick quarters and stuff like that in NBA games or an inning or whatever in MLB. But the NCAA tournament, you got all these little things. Halftime score, players. You can talk about the last 5 minute, like live betting. There's a million ways you can do it. Enjoy it on FanDuel.com. So visit FanDuel.com and get on the college hoops action all NCAA tournament long. Under Armour gives guys like me an opportunity to go out and scout. I love football. I love high school football. I love recruiting. But unless they compete all in one place, there's no idea for me or really anybody else to find out who's the best. And some say, well, just watch the huddle film. No, that's not how it works, especially with big guys. I don't want to watch a 325-pound guy run over a 220-pound guy. I could care less. That's why we go to Under Armour for the O-line, D-line drills more than anything else. Good on good, size on size. There is no substitute. Live reps under the microscope with film, with everybody right there in front of you, you putting it on the line. If you want to go up in the rankings, if you want to get more offers, camps like the Under Armour camp are the way to go. Even a local camp, do something to improve your stock. If you're not an Under Armour level player, that's okay. That's an invite-only camp, by the way, in case people are wondering. Under Armour, you don't just show up on the day and get in. No. You got to be somebody that's probably going to play P4. With that being the case, there's no reason that you can't start going to camps now and develop into that. If you're a prospect out there, if you're a coach that has somebody coming up the ranks, and they do stuff with the younger kids too. Look into it. It's not hard to find out about it. They have an 8th grade all-star game. There's a lot of different things going on. Find a way to be competitive with your camps. Not only to help yourself, it helps, again, guys like myself, John Garcia from Rival, Steve Wiltfong from On 3, everybody, really, Andrew Ivins from 24/7. Everybody needs to use these in some way, shape, or form, and we do. If it wasn't for these camps, it would be impossible to show the footage we do. It would be impossible to be able to grade the recruits in the manner that we do, or even get the interviews. Kids don't like doing the interviews anymore. They have the awards for each section, like the O-line, D-line. We'll go interview some of the players, get an idea of what's going on, see what makes them tick. They are valuable tools for me just as much as it is for you wanting to know about, hey, what's going on with this school and that school? You got to find out based on one thing, and that's just straight up face-to-face interview. There's nothing quite like that. So all in all, the camp scene is very, very important to the recruiting analysts across the country, and I love it, and I hope you do as well. Thank you for making the Portal Podcast your first listen each and every day. Please hit that like button, that notification bell, and share it. We are on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Odyssey, about any place you can imagine you get your podcast. You can find it here. I appreciate you. I will see you again tomorrow.